Now I'm going to let you in on a little bit of inside information on the Pentecost narrative in Acts 2. You see, there's this Old Testament symbol that if you understand and if you grasp, then the Pentecost narrative comes to life. And this Old Testament symbol is the temple. You see, the temple was the place where God's presence was most concentrated on earth. And if an Israelite person wanted to come and meet God, they would come to the temple and to offer a sacrifice or to seek some sort of revelation. On top of that, we also see that the temple was literally the place where heaven and earth meet. It was what's called the axis of glory. And this is fundamentally important for understanding the Pentecost account. And so in this video, we are going to look at why the temple is important and how it helps us understand the Pentecost narrative.
Now, imagine with me, you are one of the followers of Jesus in Jerusalem who has been with him after he's resurrected. And Jesus tells you to wait in Jerusalem until the promise of his Father is sent. And so you're praying with Peter and the 12 disciples, and the day of Pentecost comes. And you are in this house, and there is this incredible noise that comes in like a rushing wind. And then you look across and you see tongues of fire come down, and then people start uttering in different tongues. How would you, as a first century Jewish person, understand what's going on in this scene? Well, what's important to note is that these three elements are all actually connected to the temple and to the temple inauguration. What we've got to note is this imagery is all connected with the temple, and in particular, temple inauguration. That is, the filling of the house parallels when the glory of God will come down and fill the tabernacle and fill the temple when they're inaugurated. Right? The tongues of fire. What's really interesting here is the tongues of fire. In 1 Enoch and in other Jewish literature, this language of the tongues of fire is always connected with God's heavenly temple. We have the story of Enoch who travels up to heaven, and he's walking around God's heavenly temple, and he sees this temple built on tongues of fire. And then finally we see that Luke says that these followers of Jesus were uttering in other tongues. Now what's important here is this word uttering. It's a very unique word, and it's actually tied back to 1 Chronicles 25, where the musicians in the tabernacle under King David were playing music and uttering in the tabernacle. And so these three elements we see at the start of Acts 2 are actually all connected in with the temple inauguration. And this indicates two things. First, it indicates that the Holy Spirit is now equivalent to the Shekinah glory that would reside in the temple in the Old Testament. But then secondly, that this Shekinah glory, the Holy Spirit, was now dwelling in the followers of Jesus. That is, the church is now the new temple of God.
If you like this video, look, it would really bless me if you click the like button and leave a comment of encouragement. And if you want to see more of my videos, you could subscribe to my channel.
Now, as Luke is describing this story, he does something really unusual. He describes the audience, and he takes quite a long time to describe all the different regions of people who have seen this Pentecost account. And you're thinking, Luke, why are you doing this? You've just described this incredible outpouring of the Spirit, and we're waiting for the explanation. We're waiting for Peter's sermon because we know that he's going to be a cracker. And yet, Luke, you then list all these different regions where people have come to Jerusalem from. And you're thinking, why why have you done this? Why have you done this, Luke? Well, what's important is to notice that this isn't just by accident. Luke isn't just a madman. He's actually drawing upon a specific hope that the Jewish people had. And that is that God would gather all the exiles and bring them back to Jerusalem. This was a central hope, that God would reverse the exile that had happened under the Babylonians. Remember when the Babylonians in the Old Testament came through and destroyed the temple? There was this hope that God would restore the temple and bring all the exiles back to Jerusalem. Let me give you a couple of Old Testament passages which show this. Isaiah 11:12 says, "He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble his scattered people of Judah from the four corners of the earth." Likewise, Jeremiah said this, "I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back from captivity. I will gather you in from all the nations and the places where I have banished you from, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which you were carried into exile."
So we see at the start of Acts 2, God reversing the effects of exile. Just as the Babylonians had destroyed the temple, now God has inaugurated a new temple. Just as the Assyrians and the Babylonians had scattered the people of Israel, now these scattered exiles come back to Jerusalem to see the temple.
And now we get to the good stuff. Now we get to Peter's Pentecost sermon. And you know, there's always been this thing about Peter's Pentecost sermon which I never understood. And that is, he quotes Joel 2 to explain the coming of the Holy Spirit. But then he goes on to talk about Jesus. And no one's asked about Jesus. So how does Joel 2 and this explanation of the Spirit being poured out at Pentecost then relate to Jesus? So what we've got to understand here is the flow of Peter's Pentecost sermon. Yes, it starts off with this explanation of God's universal Spirit being poured out. He quotes Joel 2 as an explanation, saying what Joel foretold has now come to pass. But what's really fascinating is that there's this implicit question at the end of this quotation from Joel. Joel 2, the quotation finishes, "And everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved." Right? And so the question is, well, I want this Spirit, right? If you were a part of the audience, you would say, okay, cool, the eschatological Spirit's been called out. I want that Spirit. And there is this implicit question at the end. Peter says, everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. And the question is, well, who is this Lord? Who is this Lord that I must cry out to in order to receive the Spirit? And so this is the implicit question that connects Joel 2 with the rest of Peter's Pentecost sermon. He spends the rest of this sermon explaining that if Jesus is the Lord. And we see this at the end of Peter's Pentecost sermon, where it says that God has made Jesus Lord. Right? So this is answering the implicit question at the end of the Joel quotation. Everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. Who is this Lord? It's Jesus.
Now what's fascinating is that this narrative doesn't stop here. That this new eschatological temple that's been established in Acts 2 is actually described further at the end of Acts 2. And if you want to learn more about this community, you can watch this video here.